starting off with the primary color chart, tints and shades, I've got my little container of water, cadmium yellow, black for shades, white for tints, my blue paper towels, palette knife for mixing, and I'm going to use this wide flat brush so that I can get the whole thing done more or less in one fell swoop. And I have a small round brush for touch-up. For my palette, I love using, going back to the United States Postal Office Tyvek, the back page of the Bristol board, this chipboard, pretty stiff. That's what I inserted into this Postal Tyvek envelope. So it's pretty stiff. And again, the Tyvek is waterproof. It works as a great palette. It's free, so that's what's in here, okay? I'm going to set these things aside, just pull one sheet, get that ready. Okay, and on my palette, I'm going to start off with tints. So I'm going to add some cadmium yellow. I'm going to put some titanium white. Okay, I probably don't need that much. That's too much, but that way I just am not fiddling with opening up the paint again. For the first hue, I'm just going to go ahead and dip my brush in the water and get it damp and blot it dry. It'll pick up more paint that way. I'm blotting it very dry so that it's almost dry, okay? And then I'm going to add paint to my yellow section. Now it's pretty transparent, so I'm going to have to add a couple of different coats. I'm not a painter. Okay. I'm an artist in general. I typically use graphite, so I am pretty steady with my hands. It's okay if you go a little bit past, because you can just cut these out afterwards. I don't want you to submit them cut out though. Submit the whole sheet completed. If I had a blow dryer, I would blow that dry. I don't have a blow dryer, so I'm not going to worry about it. Being careful not to touch my paint, I'm going to take, I'm going to go ahead and add, I'm going to cut this in half because I'm going to use that for my shades. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of white, not a lot, a little bit, and mix that in here to start tinting my yellow. I'm going to use the same brush. Now I'm going to go ahead and use my palette knife and kind of squeeze some of that yellow paint out of there because I didn't want to dip it again into the water. Now that that's nice and mixed, I'm going to take my brush and blot it in there a little bit to mix it in with the yellow that was already on there. And I'm going to add it to the next, see how much lighter it is. So I'm going to carefully paint down. Because I'm using this brush that fits the size of the area that I want to paint, I'm able to get it done pretty quickly with minimal strokes. Okay. Now, this slightly tinted yellow is more opaque because the titanium white is more opaque than the cadmium yellow. The cadmium yellow is a little transparent. Okay. So I'm still going to go back when that dries and add another coat on top of that to make it more opaque. Okay, so now I'm going to squeeze some of this paint out of this brush. I'm going to go ahead and mix some more white to tint it up a little bit more. So you're gradually going to tint it all the way to the end. So now I can apply the next. See how much lighter it is? So it's slowly getting lighter. I want there to be a noticeable jump between tints. It's too much, so I'm going to split it in half so that I can add more white and lighten it up even lighter. I only have 2 more, so I'm going to lighten this up even more. For the last one, I'm going to do mostly white. I'm going to set some white aside. I'm going to do mostly white, and I'm going to add a little bit of that tinted yellow to the white so that it's almost white. So those are my tints, my yellow tints, and all I used was yellow and white. I have all this excess paint, so rather than throw it away, I keep these little jars with me. So that's pure yellow, so I'm going to leave that there, and I'm going to scrape up all of this paint and stick it in here. Put my brush in the water. And because this is Tyvek, I'm able to scrape it pretty hard without ruining the integrity of the surface of the Tyvek. That's why this is way better to use than a paper palette. Before I close this, I'm going to go ahead and spritz it with water. Just put a little, not a bunch, just a little moisture in there. I don't know when I'm going to open this again, so that little bit of moisture in there will help it stay moist, and now it's sealed, okay? And clean up my supplies before I go on, so I'm going to stick everything in the water. I don't need the titanium white again for a little bit, so I can move that aside. And then I have my black and my yellow out for the shade. I'm going to go ahead and clean off my palette, keeping that pure yellow. Okay, so I've washed off my Tyvek. It's stained, but there's no more wet acrylic paint on that field area. Make sure this is dried off. Okay, so now I'm going to do my shades. Now the black is really, really powerful, right? So you don't need a bunch. I'm just going to put just a little bit. You don't need a bunch. It's going to darken up that yellow fast. All my tools are clean. I'm going to blot that brush really dry. All right, so I have my pile of yellow, and I'm just going to add a little bit of black to it, just a little tiny bit, because it's going to tint that yellow fast. And then go on to this darker shade. That's kind of a big jump, what I'm seeing. So I'm going to consolidate some of this stuff in here and lighten that up a little bit. It really is better to let it dry in between. Okay, so now I'm going to take a little bit more black. But also keep in mind I only have 3 more sections, so I need to make a big enough leap to get to the dark value that I want. So now I'm going to add a little bit more black. I only have 2 more left, so I'll make probably a bigger leap right here. Okay, and I have 1 left. And then put this last shade on the end. Okay, and it looks almost green, right? So when you add black to it, it starts to look more green. Now, that's like an army green, right? And if I had more squares, I would eventually work all the way to black. And over here, you just eventually work all the way to white. Okay, so this is your hue, your tints adding white, your shades gradually adding black. You're going to do the exact same thing with red, adding white gradually as you go to the lightest and adding black gradually. And then you're going to do the same thing with blue, adding white gradually and adding black gradually. So here's a completed set of primary tints and shades. Still a little bit wet, so there's quite a bit of a glow, and my lighting is not very good. So my critique would be the red looks really good, very even, consistent steps throughout the tints and also throughout the shades, because the cadmium paint, the pigment itself, is opaque. It's thick, it's opaque, so I didn't have a lot of streaks. The yellow is very thin and transparent, and so there's a lot of streaks in it, and you really need to let it dry and give it a couple of coats before you move on if you want to avoid those streaks. Well, I don't have time for that. I'm going to leave it up to you how much time you allow yourself to do the chart. But as I added titanium white, you can see that it became more opaque. It became lighter, but the titanium, the substance itself, the pigment of the titanium is opaque. So it made the yellow more opaque as it got more tinted. However, you can see when you add black, the black was very thin. And so when I added the thin pigment of the black with the thin pigment of the yellow, it also was very transparent and kind of loose, really thin and streaky. There's no water in this. It's just the consistency of the paint. So there are paints that are called thick body paints that would avoid doing this kind of streakiness. Anyway, but you can see the shades getting gradually darker until it gets to almost black here. There is a bit of a jump here, but you know, it's trial and error. Same thing down here with the blue. The blue is very, you know, it's kind of thinner. And as I add white, it gets, the consistency of the paint gets thicker and more opaque. And so there's a more consistent brush stroke as you add the tints to the blue that I used. And then as you add black, again, the same thing's happening that happened with the yellow. It's getting a little thin and streaky. Now there's no water in this again. And it's a big jump right here. So there's, the lighting is really bad. So in all of these values look very close. But I did gradually add a little more black to each one until I got to pure black over here. And so you can kind of see every once in a while when I move the lighting that it does have a nice transition. But because of the quality of the paint, the red is the best. This red chart is the best. So I don't know what kind of paint you guys have, and we're not a painting class, but I do want you to just, the core point of this assignment is to understand the difference between a hue, which is the pure color in the middle, and these are also primary, yellow, red, and blue. And then the tints are when you add white to a pure color, you get tints of that color. And you can gradually add white until you get to pure white. And then the shades are when you gradually add black to all the way to pure black, are called shades of that color. Okay, so this is the completed primary color chart for tints and shades. You're going to complete the secondary color chart, the orange, violet, and green, on your own without me demoing. So it's the same concept. You know how to mix the paint. You mixed it successfully in your color wheels. You just need to remix enough orange to get your tints and shades, enough violet to get your tints and shades, and enough green to get your tints and shades. You also need to come up with your own process of saving your paint, or setting it aside, spritzing it with water, and having some sort of a container system so that you can save whatever excess paint you have. I'm going to leave that up to you to figure out.